The morning sun had not yet touched the glass towers of Manhattan when death came dressed as kindness. Ashford Tower rose 53 floors into the gray February sky, a monument to ambition built by men who believed money could buy anything. And on this particular Thursday morning, a stage for murder most carefully planned. The boardroom occupied the 23rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the Hudson River, where morning mist curled over dark water like smoke rising from a dying fire. A mahogany table stretched across the room, polished to such a perfect shine that board members could see their reflections staring back at them. 20 leather chairs surrounded that table. The room smelled of expensive cologne and ambition and secrets kept too long. 12 of those chairs were filled this morning. 12 board members sat in expensive suits, checking expensive watches, waiting for the woman who controlled their fortunes. They whispered about the Morrison acquisition, $300 million on the line, the biggest deal in company history. Victoria Ashford entered at exactly 8 o'clock, not a minute early, not a minute late. She moved like a blade cutting through silk. 34 years old, but carrying the weight of someone who had lived twice that long. Platinum blonde hair catching the morning light like spun gold. Eyes that could freeze a man's ambition with a single glance. She wore red today, a designer dress that hugged her slender frame like armor, because red was power made visible. Red said, "Do not test me." 5 years ago, her father, Harold Ashford, had died of a massive heart attack in this very room. Collapsed at the head of the table during a quarterly review. Dead before the paramedics arrived. He left her an empire worth billions. He also left her alone at the top of a mountain where the air was thin and trust was thinner still. His final words to her had been simple and cold. "Trust no one, Victoria. The company comes first. Always." She had honored that advice, perhaps too well. In 5 years, Victoria had transformed her father's traditional investment firm into a cutting-edge technology powerhouse, tripled the stock price, made enemies of competitors who underestimated her because she was young, because she was female, because they thought grief would make her weak. They learned otherwise, usually too late, but success had carved away the softness Victoria once possessed. She had no real friends anymore, no lovers, no family left to speak of, just the company, just the empire, just the endless climb toward a summit that kept moving higher. Victoria Ashford had everything the world said she should want, and she had absolutely no one to share any of it with. Her assistant approached, Meredith Cole, 28 years old, eager to please. She carried a porcelain cup on a silver tray. The morning ritual, every single day for 3 years. Victoria's coffee prepared exactly the same way each time. "Your morning coffee, Miss Ashford. Colombian dark roast. 1 sugar, just as you like it." Victoria reached for the cup. Her manicured fingers brushed the warm porcelain. She lifted the cup toward her lips, already thinking about the Morrison deal. "Don't drink that coffee!" The voice exploded from the doorway like a gunshot fired in a cathedral. Every head snapped toward the sound. Every conversation died mid-word. The silence that followed was so complete that Victoria could hear her own heartbeat pounding against her ribs. A man stood in the doorway, navy blue coveralls stained with the evidence of honest labor, work boots scuffed and worn, a cleaning cart abandoned behind him in the hallway. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, broad shoulders that spoke of military discipline, dark hair touched with early gray at the temples, a face weathered by experience and loss. But it was his eyes that held Victoria frozen in place. Those eyes burned with absolute certainty, not madness, not confusion, something deeper, something that had seen truth and could not stay silent about it. "What is the meaning of this outrage?" Theodore Langston's voice cut through the silence. The chief financial officer, 55 years old, face red with indignation. Someone call security this instant. The help seems to have forgotten their proper place. Laughter rippled through the room. Nervous laughter. The sound of powerful people who wanted desperately to believe their world still made sense. But Victoria did not laugh. She had built her empire on instinct, on reading people the way others read financial statements. And every instinct she possessed was screaming that this interruption was not what it appeared to be. Another man rose from his seat, Sebastian Vance, Chief Operating Officer, 40 years old, silver gray suit tailored to perfection, hair prematurely gray, slicked back from a sharp widow's peak that gave him the appearance of a predatory bird. He had joined Ashford Enterprises 3 years ago, recruited with grand promises of partnership and eventual succession. Sebastian had been patient during those 3 years, loyal, seemingly indispensable. He handled the tedious details Victoria found exhausting, whispered helpful advice in her ear during board meetings, protected her from threats she never saw coming, or so she had believed until this very moment. "This is completely absurd," Sebastian said smoothly. "We are about to finalize a $300 million acquisition, and you want to delay everything because a janitor had a bad dream?" Victoria watched Sebastian's face as he spoke, watched every micro-expression, every flicker of his eyelids, there, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something behind those cold gray eyes. Not surprise, not confusion, calculation. The quick mental mathematics of a chess player whose opponent has just made an unexpected move. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain yourself," Victoria said to the man in the doorway. Her voice could have frozen the Hudson River solid. The man stepped forward. A security guard had appeared at his elbow, ready to drag him away. But the janitor did not seem to notice. His attention was fixed entirely on Victoria. "Mercer, Ethan Mercer." His voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to pressure and danger. "That coffee you're holding contains ethylene glycol, antifreeze. It's been mixed with vanilla creamer to mask the slightly sweet smell. But the smell is still there if you know what to look for." He paused. "Someone in this room is trying to kill you, Miss Ashford, and they almost succeeded." The boardroom erupted. Voices overlapped in a cacophony of shock and denial. Chairs scraped against the floor as people jumped to their feet. Theodore Langston was shouting about lawsuits. Board members were already pulling out phones, texting lawyers. Meredith Cole stood frozen, still holding the silver tray, her face white as fresh snow. She stared at the coffee cup like it had transformed into a coiled rattlesnake. Sebastian Vance moved toward Victoria, concern painted across his handsome features. His hand reached for her arm in what appeared to be a protective gesture. His body positioned itself between her and the janitor. "Victoria, listen to me. This man is clearly disturbed. We cannot possibly delay the most important deal of our careers because a cleaning man claims to have superhuman powers of smell. I strongly suggest that we test it." Victoria's two words silenced the chaos like a gunshot in an empty church. "Excuse me?" Sebastian's mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second. "Test the coffee. Call the police. Have them bring a field testing kit." Victoria's voice carried the absolute authority that had built an empire. "If Mr. Mercer is wrong, he will face consequences. If he is right," she let the implication hang in the air. The wait lasted 45 minutes. 45 minutes of whispered conversations and nervous glances. 45 minutes of Sebastian Vance pacing by the window, his phone buzzing with messages he did not answer. 45 minutes of Theodore Langston dabbing sweat from his forehead. And through it all, Ethan Mercer stood motionless in the corner, watching, waiting. His dark eyes never leaving Sebastian Vance. Detective Nora Reyes arrived with her forensics team, 38 years old, black hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, sharp eyes set in a face that had seen too much of humanity's capacity for cruelty. She had worked homicide for 15 years, had learned the hard way that money did not make people better. It usually just made them more dangerous. The field test was simple, quick, definitive. The color strips turned deep blue first, then purple, like a bruise forming on pale skin. Positive for ethylene glycol, a lethal dose, enough to cause catastrophic organ failure within hours, enough to make death look like a heart attack or kidney failure, enough to kill Victoria Ashford and make it seem like tragic misfortune. Meredith Cole was cleared of involvement within hours. Security footage confirmed she had received the coffee already prepared from the executive kitchen, where Sebastian had unrestricted access. She collapsed into the nearest chair, hyperventilating. She had almost served her boss a death sentence without knowing. Victoria set down the poison cup with exaggerated care. Then she approached Ethan Mercer. For the first time, she truly looked at him, looked past the uniform that rendered him invisible, past the mop bucket and cleaning supplies. She saw the bearing of a soldier, spine straight, shoulders squared. She saw intelligence burning in his dark eyes, and she saw something else, something that made her breath catch. She saw someone who had suffered tremendous loss, someone who understood grief and loneliness, someone whose pain recognized her own. "You just saved my life," she said quietly. "You risked everything to warn a stranger. How did you know?" 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, ma'am. Hazardous materials specialist. 2 tours overseas, handling chemicals that could kill a man in seconds. He paused. Ethylene glycol has a distinctive smell, slightly sweet, like sugar mixed with something industrial. Most people would walk right past it, but once you've worked with hazardous materials, you never forget. You risked your job, your livelihood, everything, all on something as intangible as a smell. Ethan met her gaze. "I have a daughter waiting for me at home, Miss Ashford. Her name is Wren. She just turned 7. Every night when I tuck her into bed, I teach her that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. That courage means acting on your convictions even when you're scared." He paused. Something shifted in his dark eyes. Pain. Old pain. "Today, I had to live up to my own lessons. Some things are worth more than a job." There was weight in his words, the kind that came from loving someone with your whole heart and then having them torn away. "Your daughter's mother?" Victoria asked softly. "Your wife?" "Elise." The name came out like a prayer. "She died 5 years ago. Car accident, they told me. Ever since then, it's just been Wren and me." Before Victoria could respond, Sebastian Vance approached. His smile was perfect. His concern was flawlessly performed. But Ethan noticed how Sebastian positioned himself between them. Subtle but unmistakable. Territorial. The body language of a predator protecting its claim. "Mr. Mercer, it would seem we owe you a tremendous debt. A man of your talents shouldn't be wasting his potential pushing a mop. Allow me to walk you out. We should discuss your future with this company." Ethan allowed himself to be guided toward the door. But as they crossed the threshold into the hallway, as they moved away from witnesses, Sebastian's demeanor shifted like a snake shedding its skin. "You've worked in this building for 2 years, Mr. Mercer. I've never once noticed you before today." "That's the job, sir. Being invisible." Sebastian leaned closer, close enough that Ethan could smell his expensive cologne masking something sour underneath. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Invisible people are safer, Mr. Mercer. They live longer. They don't attract unwanted attention from people who dislike being watched." A pause. A smile that never touched those cold gray eyes. "Remember that, for your own sake, and for your daughter's sake as well." He walked away without another word. Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor, disappearing around a corner like smoke dissolving into shadow. Ethan stood alone in the empty corridor, with a warning echoing through his skull. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of men who ordered drone strikes on villages, in the faces of contractors who cut corners that cost soldiers their lives. The look of someone who would destroy anything that stood between them and what they wanted. Sebastian Vance was dangerous, far more dangerous than anyone in that boardroom suspected. And now he had noticed Ethan Mercer. The apartment in Queens was small, 2 bedrooms, barely bigger than closets. A kitchen where you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms wide. A leak in the ceiling that Ethan could not afford to fix. The furniture had been collected piece by piece from secondhand stores. But when Ethan opened the front door that evening and saw Wren running toward him with her arms stretched wide, the shabby apartment transformed into a palace. "Daddy, you're home!" He caught her in his arms and lifted her high, spinning her around until she giggled with pure delight. 7 years old, his dark hair and serious expression, her mother's gentle brown eyes and kind heart, a smile that could light up the darkest room. She wore her favorite pajamas, the ones covered with little birds, because her name meant a small songbird and she took that connection very seriously. Mrs. Kowalski, their elderly neighbor, rose slowly from the worn couch. 70 years old, white hair pinned up in a neat bun. "She would not sleep tonight," the old woman reported. "Kept telling me her daddy would be home soon, that she could feel it in her bones." That child has a sense about these things, Ethan. After Mrs. Kowalski left, Ethan sat with Wren on the worn sofa. She studied his face with an intensity that never failed to amaze him. "Something happened today," she said matter-of-factly, not a question. "How do you know that, little bird?" "Your shoulders are different tonight. Tight, like when you have bad dreams about mommy." Ethan pulled her close, breathed in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, Elise's favorite brand. He had kept buying it for 5 years because the smell made him feel like his wife was still somehow nearby. "I helped someone today. Sweetheart, someone who was in danger." "Good help or dangerous help?" "Both, I think." Wren considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then she placed her small warm hand against his cheek. "Mommy always said that the best people are the ones who help others even when it's hard, even when it might hurt them." She smiled up at him. "You're the best person I know, Daddy. Mommy would be so proud of you today." Ethan held her tight against his heart, fighting back tears. Later, long after Wren had fallen asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Ethan sat alone in the dark living room. A framed photograph of Elise watched him from its place of honor on the bookshelf. His wife, his first and truest love. Gone 5 years now, but still present in every corner of this apartment. Car accident, the police had told him. Tragic brake failure on a rainy night. The truck driver swore he could not stop in time. Case closed. Time to move on with your life, Mr. Mercer. But Elise had called him from her car exactly 10 minutes before she died, her voice shaking with terror. She said someone was following her, said she had discovered something terrible at the pharmaceutical company where she worked. Something about falsified clinical trial data. Something about patients dying from side effects the company was hiding from regulators. She was going to blow the whistle, was going to tell the FDA everything. Then she was dead, and everyone told Ethan it was just a tragic accident. He had tried to pursue the truth in the months after her funeral. Hired lawyers who accomplished nothing. Talked to journalists who mysteriously lost interest after phone calls from unnamed sources. Begged the police to reopen the investigation. A janitor's word against a billion-dollar pharmaceutical corporation. He never had a chance. Eventually, Ethan was forced to accept a settlement that barely covered funeral expenses. Was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement that felt like betraying everything his wife died for. But he had never forgotten. Never stopped watching. Never stopped believing that someday the truth would find a way to surface. And tonight, standing in Sebastian Vance's cold shadow, Something long dormant had stirred in his memory. Something about the pharmaceutical company Sebastian had helped Ashford Enterprises acquire 3 years ago. PharmaCore, the same company where Elise had worked. The same company where she discovered the fraud. The same company whose secrets she died trying to expose. Ethan moved quietly to the bedroom closet, reached up to the highest shelf and pulled down a cardboard box he had not opened in 5 years. Elise's personal belongings, her research notes, the evidence she had been gathering before she died. He carried the box to the kitchen table and spread the contents across the scratched surface with trembling hands. Pages of falsified drug trial data, names of 12 patients who died from unreported side effects, and buried in the middle of Elise's careful handwriting, a memo that made his blood freeze. Meridian Capital Partners, making inquiries about PharmaCore acquisition. Contact SV, Senior VP. They seem to know about the scandal before it's public. How? Someone inside is feeding them information. This doesn't feel like opportunism. It feels orchestrated. Sebastian Vance had worked for Meridian Capital Partners before joining Ashford Enterprises. Meridian had financed the hostile takeover of PharmaCore after the scandal finally broke, after Elise was already dead. Ethan's hands began to shake. The accident that killed his wife, the scandal that destroyed PharmaCore's reputation, the acquisition that made Sebastian Vance rich and powerful. They were all connected, all links in a chain that stretched back 5 years to a rainy night when a truck's brakes supposedly failed. Sebastian had not just killed Elise, he had profited from her death, had built his entire glittering career on her unmarked grave. And now he was trying the exact same strategy with Victoria Ashford. History repeating itself because no one had ever stopped him the first time. The next morning, Ethan stood in Victoria's corner office on the 52nd floor. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The entire Manhattan skyline glittered behind her. He had laid out everything across her enormous desk. Elise's research notes, the connection to PharmaCore, Sebastian's role, the pattern of destruction that followed in his wake. Victoria read each document with the intense focus of a surgeon studying scans before a life-or-death operation. When she finally looked up, her face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. "You're telling me that my chief operating officer, the man I've trusted for 3 years, killed your wife, and now he's trying to kill me using the exact same playbook?" "He's done this before, Miss Ashford. Create a scandal or crisis, remove the person standing in the way, acquire the assets at a bargain price, move on to the next target." Ethan's voice was steady despite the pain beneath every word. "I can't prove murder in court, not yet, but I can show you the pattern." "Why bring this to me? Why not go straight to the police?" "Because I'm a janitor, Miss Ashford, a nobody. My word means nothing against a man with expensive lawyers and powerful connections." He paused, met her eyes directly. "But you have power. You have resources. We need each other if we're going to bring him down." Victoria rose and walked slowly to the window, stood there staring at her own reflection superimposed over the city she had conquered. "My father told me to trust no one. I've lived by that rule my entire adult life. It's kept me safe. Has it made you happy?" The question hung between them, simple, direct, devastating. Victoria turned to face him. Something flickered in her ice-blue eyes. Pain she had buried so deep she had forgotten it existed. Loneliness she had convinced herself was strength. "No," she admitted quietly. "It's kept me alive, but it has never once made me happy. I have everything the world says I should want, and I am more alone than anyone I've ever known." "Then maybe it's time to try something different." Their eyes met across the vast expanse of her office. Two broken people standing in a room full of expensive things that meant nothing. Two survivors recognizing something achingly familiar in each other's scars. Victoria extended her hand. "All right, Mr. Mercer. We work together. I won't betray you. Ethan took her hand firmly. My wife died trying to tell the truth. I won't dishonor her memory by becoming a liar. Over the next 2 weeks, they met in secret every night, long hours surrounded by financial records and forensic analyses. Ethan's cleaning rounds provided perfect cover. No one paid attention to a janitor working overtime. Together, they discovered a web of corruption that stunned even Victoria. Shell companies funneling money through offshore accounts, falsified earnings reports designed to manipulate stock prices, board members secretly receiving payments from Sebastian in exchange for their votes. A shadow structure already in place, waiting to take control the moment Victoria was removed from power. Security footage from the executive kitchen was particularly damning. Sebastian had entered at 6:47 a.m. on the morning of the poisoning, 11 minutes before Meredith arrived to prepare Victoria's coffee. The vanilla creamer, the one that would mask the antifreeze's smell, had been Sebastian's suggestion 3 months earlier. He had been planning this for at least that long, but the long nights were not all business. They shared meals from paper containers, sitting on the floor of her office because neither wanted to sit across a desk like strangers anymore. They talked about their lives, their losses, their dreams that had died young. I haven't eaten from a takeout container in years, Victoria admitted one night. My father would have been horrified. He believed appearances were everything. Ren loves Chinese food, Ethan said, surprising himself by smiling. She always orders extra dumplings and then can't finish them, but she insists on trying every time. She says hope is more important than experience. Victoria set down her chopsticks. Her expression softened. Tell me about her. I want to know everything. And Ethan did. He talked for almost an hour about his daughter's fierce intelligence, her startling kindness, her terrible jokes that made him laugh even when the world seemed hopeless. She sounds extraordinary, Victoria said softly, like a miracle wrapped in bird print pajamas. She's the best part of me. The only reason I kept going after Elise died. Victoria looked away quickly, hiding tears. I always wanted children, she said after a long moment. But my father told me women in leadership don't have time for families, that I had to choose between being a mother and being a CEO. That was his choice, Victoria. His fear. You don't have to live by someone else's rules forever. She turned to face him, her armor completely gone now. No one has ever said that to me before. Their eyes met across the scattered containers. Something passed between them that neither could put into words. Not romance, not yet, but recognition, understanding. The connection of two people who had been invisible in different ways and were finally being seen. Then Victoria's phone buzzed urgently, a calendar alert that shattered the moment. Sebastian had called an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning. He was making his move at last. That same night, Sebastian found Ethan alone in the underground parking garage. The concrete cavern was empty at this late hour. Fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow pallor. You think I don't know what you've been doing, Mr. Mercer? The voice slithered out of the shadows between two parked luxury vehicles. Sebastian emerged like a specter given flesh, his silver suit immaculate, his smile cold enough to freeze blood. I know exactly who you are now. Did some research. Know all about Elise. Know about those notes she kept hidden before her unfortunate accident. Sebastian stepped closer. And I know about little Ren. Beautiful child. PS 234 elementary school. Gets out every day at exactly 3 o'clock. Lives in apartment 4B. Dread coiled through Ethan's chest like a serpent tightening its grip. If you dare touch my daughter. I don't need to touch anyone directly. That's not how sophisticated people handle problems. Sebastian's smile widened. Accidents happen every day in the city. Brake failures, trucks losing control on busy streets, little girls who dart into traffic chasing a ball. A pause. You know all about accidents, don't you? About how they happen to people who ask too many questions? He was talking about Elise, openly, brazenly, admitting everything without saying anything a prosecutor could use. Drop the investigation tonight. Tell Miss Ashford tomorrow that you made a mistake. Apologize to the board. Grovel convincingly. Sebastian's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. Do exactly as I say, and your daughter remains safe. Refuse, and, well, accidents happen, even to the most innocent among us. He turned and walked away into the shadows. The click of his expensive shoes fading like a heartbeat slowing toward death. Ethan stood alone in the concrete darkness, his whole body trembling, but not with fear, with rage, pure and absolute. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. He knows everything. He threatened Wren. Victoria's response was immediate, fierce with protective fury. Come to my office right now. We accelerate everything. No more waiting. Sebastian thinks he has time to prepare for tomorrow's meeting. He's wrong. Her voice hardened to steel. And I swear to you, I will not let that monster touch your family. Not now. Not ever. By midnight, Victoria had mobilized every resource at her disposal. Private security for Wren. 24 hours a day starting immediately. The child would never know she was being guarded. Forensic accountants working through the night to document every crime Sebastian had committed, every shell company, every falsified report, creating a paper trail that would lead straight to a prison cell. Lawyers preparing evidence packets for the FBI, for the SEC, for every federal agency with jurisdiction, and Detective Nora Reyes, brought in secretly, reviewing every piece of evidence connecting Sebastian to Elisa's death. We get one chance at this, Victoria said as dawn began to lighten the sky. Tomorrow's meeting is where Sebastian plans to destroy me, present falsified evidence of my supposed crimes, turn the board against me, vote me out so he can seize control. She turned to face Ethan. Her eyes were steel. Instead, we destroy him, completely, permanently, in front of everyone. Before the fateful meeting began, Ethan placed something on Victoria's desk. A card Wren had made the night before, 3 figures drawn in crayon, a tall man with dark hair, a little girl with a smile stretching across her face, and a woman in a red dress with yellow hair standing beside them. Above the figures, a lopsided heart. Victoria opened the card and read the words inside. Read them twice with glistening eyes. Dear Miss Victoria, thank you for making my daddy smile again. He was sad for such a long time after Mommy went to heaven, but when he talks about you now, his eyes get bright like they used to be. I think Mommy would like you very much. She always said Daddy deserves to be happy. Maybe you can be happy together. Love forever, Wren. P.S. I can teach you how to make pancakes. She's absolutely remarkable, Victoria whispered when she could speak again. She believes in you completely. So do I. Victoria folded the card carefully and tucked it into her jacket pocket, directly over her heart. Then let's make sure we don't disappoint her. The boardroom was packed beyond capacity, 20 seats filled with nervous board members, lawyers lining the walls, journalists who had somehow been alerted to the emergency session. The air crackled with tension and anticipation. Sebastian Vance stood at the head of the mahogany table, like a conquering general surveying territory he considered already won. Slides projected on the screen behind him, charts showing manufactured losses, evidence carefully created to paint a picture of Victoria's incompetence and criminal behavior. As you can clearly see from the data, Sebastian declared confidently, Ashford Enterprises has suffered $47 million in losses this quarter alone under current leadership. He clicked to the next slide. Bank statements, emails, a damning pattern of what appeared to be embezzlement. Furthermore, my investigation has uncovered evidence of serious financial irregularities. Funds diverted to hidden personal accounts. A systematic looting of company resources. Theodore Langston was nodding gravely. Other board members exchanged worried glances. The attempted poisoning has clearly affected Miss Ashford's judgment. She sees conspiracies everywhere. Trusts janitors over trained executives. I move that we vote immediately on a transfer of leadership. Hands were reaching for voting paddles. Victoria stood slowly from her seat. Every single document Mr. Vance just presented is a complete fabrication. The room went absolutely silent. Every chart is manufactured. Every email is forged. Every bank statement is falsified. Victoria's voice carried unshakable authority. And I have the proof. She nodded toward the boardroom door. Ethan Mercer walked in, not wearing his janitor's uniform, a simple black suit that fit his soldier's frame with quiet dignity. He wore it with the bearing of a decorated veteran, shoulders squared, chin raised, dark eyes steady and unafraid. Whispers rippled through the assembled crowd. This is Ethan Mercer, former United States Army Corps of Engineers. 8 years of distinguished military service, including 2 combat tours. The man who saved my life 3 weeks ago. Victoria paused. And the man who uncovered the truth about Sebastian Vance. This is absolutely ridiculous. Sebastian's mask cracked wide open. You're taking the word of a cleaning man? A janitor? Ethan stepped calmly to the podium, connected his laptop to the projector. His hands were rock steady. 2 weeks ago, I began investigating the real financial irregularities at Ashford Enterprises. Not the fictional ones Mr. Vance created to frame Miss Ashford. The actual crimes he committed over 3 years to position himself for this coup. New slides replaced Sebastian's fabrications. Flowcharts showing money moving through shell companies. Bank statements from offshore accounts. Emails between Sebastian and compromised board members promising kickbacks. A web of corruption laid completely bare. But this is not the first time Mr. Vance has employed these tactics. New slides appeared. The PharmaCorp logo, newspaper headlines about a deadly drug trial scandal, and a photograph of a beautiful woman with gentle brown eyes and a warm smile. Elise. 5 years ago, my wife Elise Mercer worked for PharmaCorp Pharmaceuticals. She discovered the company was concealing deadly side effects in their clinical trial data. Side effects that had already killed 12 patients. She gathered evidence. She was preparing to report everything to federal regulators. Ethan's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. 2 weeks before she could go public, her car was struck by a delivery truck. Brake failure, the investigators concluded. A tragic accident. Case closed. He looked directly at Sebastian Vance. That truck belonged to a subsidiary of Meridian Capital Partners, the firm where Sebastian Vance was a senior partner, the firm that financed the hostile takeover of PharmaCorp after my wife was silenced, the firm that profited enormously from her death. The room had become a tomb. My wife was murdered. Murdered because she tried to tell the truth. Murdered so that Sebastian Vance could profit from the destruction of innocent lives. And the man who ordered her death is standing in this room right now pretending to be shocked. And there is one final matter, Victoria added, her voice carrying the weight of 5 years of grief. The FBI has reopened the investigation into my father's death. Harold Ashford's heart attack 5 years ago bears suspicious similarities to ethylene glycol poisoning. Symptoms that an overworked coroner might easily mistake for cardiac arrest. Sebastian's first victim wasn't your wife, Mr. Mercer. She looked at Ethan with tears in her eyes. It was my father. Sebastian's face cycled through confident to pale to red with fury. This is fantasy. Delusion. His wife died in a car accident 5 years ago. A tragic accident. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. Victoria's voice sliced through the noise with surgical precision. Mr. Vance, how exactly did you know that Elise Mercer was his wife? The boardroom froze solid. What? Listen carefully. Mr. Mercer never once mentioned in his presentation that Elise Mercer was his wife. He referred to her only as Elise Mercer, PharmaCorp employee. He deliberately never stated their relationship. Victoria's eyes were iron. Only someone who already knew about the personal connection, someone who had researched Ethan Mercer's background in detail, would automatically assume the woman in that photograph was his wife. Only someone who was directly involved in her death would make that revealing mistake. Sebastian's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words emerged. Only someone who murdered her, Victoria continued relentlessly, would know to connect the janitor investigating his crimes to the woman he had killed 5 years ago. The boardroom doors burst open. Detective Nora Reyes strode in, flanked by 2 FBI agents. Sebastian Vance, you are under arrest. The charges include conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. The handcuffs clicked shut around Sebastian's wrists with a sound like a cell door slamming. He turned back one final time, eyes blazing with impotent hatred. You think you've won? I have resources you can't imagine. Connections at the highest levels. This is far from over. Your resources were frozen at 6 o'clock this morning by federal court order. Victoria interrupted calmly. Your connections are currently hiring their own criminal defense attorneys. Every crime you've committed over the past decade is under investigation by 3 separate federal agencies. She stepped closer. Let him see the certainty in her eyes. It's over, Sebastian, completely and permanently. You lost, and Elisa Mercer's husband is the one who finally brought you down. They led him away in handcuffs. His protests echoing down the marble hallway, growing fainter with distance, then finally blessedly silent. 6 months later. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of damning evidence and devastating testimony. 3 weeks of Sebastian's expensive lawyers trying every trick to save their client. Ethan sat in the front row of the federal courthouse every single day. Victoria sat beside him. Her hand found his when the prosecutor displayed evidence of Elisa's murder. Her strength carried him when his own threatened to fail. When the verdict came down, guilty on every single count, Ethan did not cheer. He simply closed his eyes and whispered words meant for someone who was no longer there. Justice at last, Elise. Finally, after all these years. Sentencing followed 1 month later, 45 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Sebastian Vance would die behind bars, stripped of everything he had schemed and murdered to acquire. The Elise Mercer Memorial Scholarship was established with a substantial donation from Victoria personally. Within its first year, 200 families received life-changing assistance. Elise's dream of helping others finally alive and thriving. Ethan completed his engineering recertification after 2 years of night classes. Countless hours of studying at the kitchen table while Ren did her homework beside him. When he walked across the stage at graduation, 2 voices rose above all others. Victoria and Ren, his 2 girls, his family. On a quiet Saturday evening 3 years after the trial ended, 3 people stood together in a small apartment in Queens. The leak in the ceiling had finally been repaired. New furniture filled the modest rooms. Fresh paint brightened the walls. But it was still the same home it had always been. Because home was never about square footage or expensive furnishings. Home was about the people you shared it with. Victoria wore faded jeans and one of Ethan's old sweaters. She stood at the small stove attempting to stir spaghetti sauce under the exacting supervision of a 10-year-old master chef who had grown 2 inches taller and considerably more confident in her culinary authority. You're stirring wrong, Miss Victoria. It has to be in circles. And you added way too much salt again. I'm so sorry, Chef Ren. Please be patient with me. That's okay. You're doing pretty good for a beginner. Victoria laughed. a real laugh, the kind that traveled all the way from her heart to her eyes. Ethan watched them from the kitchen doorway, his daughter and the woman who had somehow become family, his two girls. Later, after Wren had fallen asleep on the couch, with sauce still drying on her cheek and her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, Ethan and Victoria stood together on the small balcony. Manhattan glittered in the distance like a galaxy of earthbound stars. 3 years ago, Victoria said softly, I had everything the world said mattered. Power, money, success, a corner office with a view. She paused. I had absolutely nothing that actually mattered. And now, she turned to face him. No armor remaining, no walls still standing. Now I have spaghetti sauce on my jeans, a 10-year-old boss who judges my cooking, and a man who risked everything to save a complete stranger because it was the right thing to do. She reached up and touched his face gently. I have everything, Ethan. Everything that actually matters. He reached into his pocket. His fingers found the small velvet box that had been waiting there for weeks. Inside rested a simple silver ring with a small clear stone that caught the city lights like a captured star. This ring belonged to my grandmother. She wore it for 53 years of marriage. When she died, she gave it to my mother with instructions to pass it to me, to give to the woman I would love forever. His voice cracked with emotion. Elise wore this ring for 8 years. I never thought I would give it to anyone else. What changed? Wren told me something. She said broken pieces can make something more whole and beautiful than the original ever was. You just have to find the right person to put them together with. Someone who understands that the cracks are part of the story. He lowered himself slowly to one knee. The Manhattan skyline spread out behind him like a blessing. Victoria Ashford, will you put the broken pieces together with me? Will you be my family? Tears streamed freely down her face. Yes. Her voice broke on the single syllable. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting her whole life to find its way home. They kissed under the city lights, a gentle kiss, a promise kiss. The kiss of two people who had found something neither ever expected to find. Behind them, the balcony door cracked open. Wren peeked out through the gap, grinning from ear to ear, her small hands forming the shape of a heart. I knew it, she whispered happily. Now we're all family forever, right? The three of us, Ethan confirmed, pulling both his girls close against his heart. Forever and ever. Some love stories do not begin with passion or moonlit walks on the beach or perfect first dates at expensive restaurants. They begin with courage. One ordinary person choosing to protect another. Even when staying silent would be safer. Even when speaking up could cost everything. Ethan Mercer had been invisible for 5 long years, a ghost haunting the halls of power, waiting for a chance that might never come. But when he shouted those 4 simple words across a boardroom full of powerful people, he did not just save one life. He saved his own. He found justice for Elise after years of aching silence. He found partnership with Victoria after believing he would be alone forever. He found hope in the possibility of love after loss. 4 words. 1 moment of impossible bravery. 3 lives transformed forever. Don't drink that coffee. Never underestimate the power of speaking up. Never believe that you are too small to make a difference. Never think that invisible people cannot change the entire world. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that matters most.